Welcome to Mix Sessions Emmy Award season. My name is Lily Moayeri, and I am one of Mix Magazine's frequent contributors. I'm excited to have award-winning composer and pianist Nicholas Britell joining us to speak about his score for Underground Railroad. Underground Railroad is a limited series from director Barry Jenkins based on the Colson Whitehead Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, which recently premiered on Amazon Prime Video. Nicholas, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
There is so much to talk about where this series is concerned. It is your latest collaboration with Barry Jenkins, whom you've worked with a number of times before. You scored his Academy Award-winning film Moonlight. You also scored If Beale Street Could Talk, for which you yourself were nominated for Academy Awards for both of those films. Have you and Barry developed a shorthand or an understanding for what he's looking for in your score? And what specifically was the communication like for Underground Railroad?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I think first off, I would just say I feel so lucky to be able to work with Barry Jenkins because he is just a truly brilliant artist. And early on in the projects, we have these really fascinating conversations because he has very strong kind of like early instincts for things, and it's in those early conversations that I think Barry and I really start getting a sense of at least where we're going to start. And I think if there's a real sort of connection or joint sensibility, I think it's a real connection in our approach. We both have this kind of almost philosophy that we don't know where we're going to wind up. And because of that, I think we're both incredibly open to experimenting. There's no wrong ideas in the sense that like everything early on is going to teach us something about the project that we're working on. And I think it's that kind of constant exploration, that kind of constant, like we always say to each other that, we're learning, the project's going to teach us what it needs. And I think it's that sort of openness to trying things out, the lack of kind of judgment of what we're doing and just viewing it as like, Barry will say, we're chopping wood, we're just kind of, we're learning. And I think it's that's a real commonality between us. And we don't just say that, I mean, we really mean it. Like, we don't know where we're going to wind up. And it's fascinating. I think it keeps every project a wonderful journey where you're exploring things and you're talking and you're learning. And there's a point, what's really fascinating is I think there's always a point about 60 to 70% of the way on each of these projects where we've learned, there's almost like, you call it maybe like a critical mass of learning that we've done, where all of a sudden, all sorts of ideas kind of crystallize to us and lock into place. And then what's amazing is that we then start saying to ourselves, okay, well, actually now let's look back at all the other stuff we did with what we've now learned. So it makes me want to go back and, re-explore my early ideas. So it's a constant process, and that's how I think we really believe that very deeply, and it's the way, it's like a way, it's the way we approach things. And on Underground Railroad in particular, those early conversations, I had read the book, and there were all sorts of questions that the book raised as far as like what type of musical landscape might be part of this world. And it was the early conversation with Barry where actually what happened was it wasn't even so much a conversation as it was an audio text message that he sent me. He was in Savannah shooting, and I received an audio message. And when I listened to it, it just sounded like construction equipment with no comment. It was just like sort of drilling or something, and wasn't sure what that was. A few hours later, I got a text from Barry, and he just wrote, "Did you get what I sent?" And immediately I knew what he was talking about. And I listened to that sound and I dragged it into my system and I started bending it and playing with it. And it was drilling equipment that wasn't even on set. It was sort of near where they were shooting. And in the distance, he heard this rhythm of the drilling. And so I took that sound and I started to bend it. And there was sort of this almost like undulating tone to it. And it also had a rhythm that Barry was really drawn to. And just hearing that and thinking about, well, what does that mean for us? It means we're digging, we're drilling, we're going down, we're going downward, we're going underground, and earth. And is this some sort of elemental force almost that we're going to explore? And then, okay, if we're exploring earth and digging, what about air? And what's in the air? It's cicadas. And then getting sounds of cicadas. And our amazing sound supervisor, Anna Lee, sent these beautiful field recordings she had done of cicadas. And then air, okay, well, what about fire? And so we're exploring all of these kinds of things and getting these real fire sounds. And it was these early kind of, not just the sonic experiments of those, because, manipulating those sounds and listening to them and seeing what they provide inspirationally, but then also asking, I think, more conceptual questions about what does this mean to us? And the concept of going downward and going underground led me to then say, well, is there a motif? What would it mean musically going downward? And I wrote this chromatic descent, sort of E flat D, D flat C, and this sort of rhythm that would go with it. And that was something which was an initial seed of an idea, which over many, many months, through many more explorations, eventually became one of the central concepts that you actually hear in the opening piece in the series, right at the very top of the show. So that's a long way of saying how some of these early, almost like ideas that are almost so big picture that you're sort of like, how do we get down to specifics? They start in these big questions, and then we do eventually come to, to something very specific.
Very specific. And that is one of the qualities of your score. It has these elements of sound design, which is pretty much what you were describing, that they're weaved into your compositions really seamlessly. So unless you told me that that was the sound of the drill, I don't know that I would recognize it as that, because it's just embedded in the score so well. What are some of these? You mentioned some sound sources. What are some other sound sources maybe that you used for the overall score, but specifically for the sound design quality of it? And were there other examples like what you gave us earlier?
So it's interesting. The sounds, anytime I was using specific sounds, I would always be in touch directly with Anna Lee, because she was creating sounds and recording sounds for the show. And so, for example, the fire sound, which I wove in, that was in collaboration with Anna. She sent that over, and I would then manipulate it and bend it and weave it in. So there is this blurring of the boundary between the incredible sound design work that she and her team did, and then the score. It's sort of like almost like the intersecting point where they become one in a sense at times. The cicadas definitely wound up, and actually similar to the way that the drilling inspired a musical concept. The cicadas themselves actually inspired some musical concepts. And also there are these, it's almost like I was trying to almost replicate the sound, like what we might like mentally imagine is almost the sound or the musical sound of like fireflies and cicadas and these sort of things. So there are these, it's actually at times it's violins, and a prepared piano, and they're playing this sort of like interesting rising and falling motifs, and those very subtly wind up in certain of the pieces, inspired by cicadas. There's actually a main melody, which it was interesting. Barry and I, when we were listening to one of these cicada recordings, I slowed it down, and when they're fast, you can't really make out what's happening. It's just it's sort of that characteristic sound of cicadas. But when you slow them, you actually start hearing like melodies. And I slowed them a lot, and I focused on one of them, and Barry and I actually named that cicada Fred, because it was that we were like, oh, that's Fred. That's our little, thing. And one of them, I tried to hear like what the cicada was doing, and one of the melodies actually, it's not exactly what the cicada did, but it was this F sharp minor theme that I wrote. And again, it's something I'd never done before, but sort of like letting nature almost speak to us as our initial inspiration at times, and what that meant to us. So it was a very, this happened over, I was working on this. I just finished the albums themselves. So it was about a 20-month process of working on this all the time, basically.
It's really extensive. I mean, usually it doesn't take almost 2 years to get everything done from start to finish. And a lot of that was during the pandemic.
Yes.
Although you would never be able to tell, because the score is so rich and full. what were some of the restrictions that you were facing and how did you address them? But also, did the pandemic work in your favor in some cases?
That's a great question because, well, in the beginning, we were working initially pre-pandemic, and then Barry was actually able to shoot the whole series except for just a few days by March, and so that's one of the reasons we were able to keep working in post production was because basically almost everything had been shot, and so they could edit. And eventually, Barry was able, in a very controlled, safe way, to get those remaining days. But for us, it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge. Barry and I, one of the key characteristics I think of our relationship and our working relationship is being in person and working in person. And I think there's such an incredible importance to being in the same room and hearing the same things and seeing the same things. There's that. It's actually that togetherness, I think, that enables a lot of figuring things out. And so not being able to do that in early on was a challenge. I mean, I remember, before everyone started using Zoom, we hadn't downloaded Zoom or anything like that. No one knew about this yet. So early on, we were like using FaceTime video, and I would sort of like angle the computer up at my screen. And I was like, and he's like, I can't really hear that. And I was, well, take a look. Can you see, so it was not conducive or efficient to doing what we need to do. So what ended up actually happening was my wife and I moved out to Los Angeles, and we're in a quarantine pod with Barry for 6 months. And the sort of counterintuitive benefit to this was that we ended up spending more time in person together than we've ever spent combined, on all the projects together because of the pandemic. So it actually enabled us to have this almost unbelievably, together, connected, directed kind of work experience, which in hindsight was completely necessary because the scope of what we were trying to do was so large that if we hadn't been able to work hours upon hours all the time, I don't think it would have been possible to finish this.
It makes a lot of sense. Nicholas, thank you so much for your time. I love your scores, not just for Underground Railroad, all of them.
Good.
And I can
Thank
easily
you.
listen to them on their own without picture as just a beautiful piece of music.
Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate that.
Stay tuned for more great conversations at Mixed Sessions Emmy Awards season.